The summer evening in Kyoto carried a fragrance only this ancient capital could hold. A soft blend of incense, cedarwood, and distant rain. Hiroshi, a young samurai, walked slowly along the stone-paved streets of Gion, the district known for centuries as the heart of refined entertainment. Unlike the bustling merchant quarters, Gion was a place of whispers and subtle gestures, where the glow of paper lanterns promised beauty and secrecy. Hiroshi had returned only days ago from a military campaign under the Tokugawa shogunate, the centralized government that had finally ended centuries of civil war and brought fragile peace to Japan. His armor still bore faint scratches from battle, and his soul carried wounds no sword could heal. For a samurai, life had always been about loyalty and discipline, values summarized by the word Bushido. Bushido means the way of the warrior, demanding absolute loyalty, honor above life itself, and emotional restraint. Love was not forbidden, but it was expected to yield to duty. And yet, on this evening, Hiroshi's heart stirred with something far from war or duty. He had heard of a geisha named Aika, a woman whose mai odori, dance, graceful, slow, and deeply emotional, could still the breath of even the hardest warriors. The streets of Dian were alive with the Oban festival, a time when families welcomed the spirits of their ancestors home. Lanterns floated on the river like tiny souls returning from another world. Monks chanted sutras in the distance, and the sound of the shamisen, a three-stringed instrument unique to Japan, drifted like silk through the summer air. Hiroshi followed the music to an ochaya, a private tea house. Unlike common taverns, ochaya were exclusive spaces where trained geisha entertained guests with music, poetry, and dance rather than physical affection. Inside, Eika performed beneath the warm lantern light, her kimono a cascade of summer hues, soft blue with cranes flying toward a painted moon. The obi, a wide sash tied at her back, held her posture elegantly, a sign of years of discipline and artistry. As she moved, each step deliberate, her eyes met Hiroshi's, just for a moment, but enough to shift the rhythm of his breathing. For the first time since leaving the battlefield, Hiroshi felt something tighten in his chest, not fear, but something he had no name for yet. Inside the ochaya, warm light from paper lanterns danced on lacquered wood and kakejiku, scrolls of calligraphy depicting haiku about impermanence and beauty. Guests knelt politely on tatami mats, low straw mats symbolic of status and simplicity in Japanese culture. Tea was served with deliberate gestures from attendants trained in chanoyu, the tea ceremony rooted in Zen philosophy. Every motion calm, every sound intentional. Aika stood at the center, her kimono shifting gently as she bowed with grace taught only in an okiya, the boarding school where young girls trained for years to become geisha. Her kanzashi hairpins glimmered as she performed mai odori. Unlike dramatic kabuki dances, mai odori was intimate, slow, deliberate, telling a story through every angle of wrist and tilt of head. Hiroshi watched her, realizing geisha were not what outsiders often assumed. They were not courtesans, but artists, cultural icons embodying music, dance, and conversation. They lived under strict rules, including one unspoken law: a geisha must never love a client. That rule protected their independence and mystique, preventing emotional entanglements that could jeopardize their careers. Aika's eyes met Hiroshi's mid-performance. For a heartbeat, the shamisen notes faded, and the oban chants outside felt distant. Her gaze was soft yet piercing, as though she recognized a loneliness in him. Hiroshi, who had faced spears and arrows without blinking, suddenly felt his chest tighten. When the performance ended, polite applause filled the room, but Hiroshi stayed silent, studying the way she closed her sensu, her folding fan, signaling the end of the dance. That small motion felt like a door closing and opening at the same time, and Hiroshi knew something had shifted inside him. When most guests left, Hiroshi lingered, pretending to admire the calligraphy scrolls. In truth, his attention followed Aika, who was carefully removing her kanzashi pins, letting her hair fall slightly looser, a rare vulnerability in someone trained to hide feelings. She approached, holding her sensu fan. "Samurai-sama," she greeted softly, her voice carrying the polished tone drilled into every geisha. Years in the okiya had taught her perfect bowing angles, precise phrasing, and even how to laugh without revealing sorrow. "I am no longer worthy of that title," Hiroshi replied quietly. "The war is over. I have no master now." He touched the scar on his chin, a gift from the campaign under the Tokugawa banner. Aika studied him. Geisha were trained to read people's moods, to sense what words never said. She saw not just a warrior, but a man searching for identity after war. Outside, the garden awaited. Stone toro lanterns casting dim halos over a koi pond. Paper lanterns above shifted in the evening breeze. Hiroshi followed Aika there, the silence heavy, yet strangely comforting. In that quiet, Hiroshi whispered, "Your dance, it was more than art. It was freedom." Aika smiled faintly, looking at her reflection on the pond. "Freedom," she repeated, "is a luxury neither samurai nor geisha truly have." The koi rippled beneath the lantern light, circles expanding like unspoken thoughts. Hiroshi turned to Aika. "If you could choose, would you still be a geisha?" Aika hesitated. For a geisha, revealing true emotions risked everything. Yet tonight felt different. "I chose this path when I was a girl, or maybe it chose me," she whispered. "But love is not part of it. We are told, never love a client. It keeps the heart untangled, they say." And yet, Hiroshi replied, "Here I am, wishing I could be just a man, not a samurai." The distance between them closed slightly, but centuries of tradition seemed to stand there like invisible walls. The Bushido code behind Hiroshi and the strict geisha discipline behind Aika, two worlds built on honor and restraint. A firefly landed on Aika's fan, glowing briefly. She smiled. She said softly, "Perhaps if we must break a rule, let it be for something worth breaking it for." They shared a silence that said more than words. Dawn came quietly to Gion, painting the tiled rooftops gold. Hiroshi stepped out of the ochaya, holding a folded slip of paper, Aika's handwriting, a haiku. Lantern sways at night. A warrior lost his own name, but finds her soft gaze. He placed it inside his armor, where war orders once lay. For the first time in years, his chest felt lighter, but the invisible weight of Bushido pressed still, a reminder of who he was supposed to be. To love a geisha meant defying rules older than both of them. Yet sometimes, one small defiance could change a life. As he walked toward the rising sun, Hiroshi whispered, "For her, I would lay down my sword again." But the road ahead was uncertain. Rumors of unrest in nearby provinces stirred again. Ronin bandits and whispers of betrayal among the Shogun's retainers. Hiroshi's story and Aika's had only just begun.
The late Sengoku period, Japan's age of warring states, was a time of shifting loyalties and endless battles. Hidden deep among the misty mountains of Iga province, small villages trained generations of ninja, covert agents skilled in espionage, sabotage, and assassination. Unlike the proud samurai who followed the Bushido code and fought in open combat, ninja relied on stealth, disguise, and tools such as the shuriken, throwing stars, and kusaragama, a sickle attached to a chain, deadly both at close and mid-range. Ryo, one of the most skilled ninja of Iga, moved through the silent forest like a shadow. His mission that night was clear: infiltrate a border outpost of the Koga clan, Iga's centuries-old rival. The rivalry between Iga and Koga was legendary. Two schools of ninjutsu, whose tactics were so different they became symbols of opposition itself. Yet, for all his training in deception and emotional detachment, Ryo carried a secret. Days earlier, during reconnaissance, he had seen her, Hana, the daughter of the Koga lord. Unlike warriors hardened by blood, she walked with grace, carrying scrolls of poetry rather than weapons. It was only a glance across a marketplace, but her presence lingered in his mind like the echo of a shamisen string. As he approached the Koga border, Ryo felt something unfamiliar, a hesitation unbefitting an Iga ninja. His masters had taught him, the mission is everything, the heart is nothing. But tonight, his heart refused obedience. The moonlight barely touched his shinobi shozoku, the ninja attire designed for concealment, with ties silent enough to make every movement soundless. His hand rested on a pouch of shuriken, but his thoughts lingered on Hana's eyes.
The outpost stood quiet, a wooden structure surrounded by bamboo groves, guarded by Koga sentries. Ryo scaled the wall with silent precision, a skill perfected through ninjutsu, the art of stealth and unconventional warfare taught in Iga for generations. Ninja training involved more than combat. It included meditation, poisons, camouflage, and even psychology, shaping warriors who fought in the shadows rather than on open fields. Inside the courtyard, his steps froze. There, under the glow of a hanging lantern, stood Hana, the daughter of the Koga lord. She was arranging offerings for Obon, paper lanterns to guide ancestral spirits home. The war between Iga and Koga had lasted lifetimes, yet here was someone untouched by hatred, tending to her family's traditions with quiet grace. Hana looked up. Their eyes met. There was no scream, no alarm. Instead, she tilted her head, curious rather than fearful. "You are from Iga, aren't you?" she asked softly, her voice calm as still water. Ryo hesitated. A ninja never revealed his origin, yet he found himself nodding. Hana smiled faintly. "Then you are supposed to hate me." He lowered his gaze. "Perhaps I was supposed to." That night, under the bamboo shadows, an unspoken bond formed, fragile, dangerous, yet undeniably human. The days that followed were stolen moments, brief encounters near shrines, whispers exchanged in forests where even the wind seemed to listen. Ryo taught Hana how to throw a shuriken, and in return, she showed him poems she had written about peace, a dangerous word in the Sengoku period. Every meeting carried risk. If either clan discovered them, death was certain. The Koga had their own form of ninjutsu, emphasizing speed and deception, while Iga excelled in endurance and silent movement. For centuries, their rivalry was a cycle of ambushes and betrayals, each side seeing the other as dishonorable. Yet Hana spoke differently. "My father says Iga ninjas are ruthless," she whispered once, "but I see kindness in your eyes." Ryo smiled slightly, though pain touched it. "Kindness is a weakness in my world." Hana shook her head. "No, it is the only strength that will end this cycle." Under the lantern light of an abandoned tea pavilion, they shared a moment longer than they should have. A hand held, a silent promise neither dared speak aloud. The inevitable happened. A Kuga scout spotted them near the border shrine. Within hours, word reached Hana's father, who saw the affair not as love, but as treason. Ryo returned to his Iga village, only to find his master waiting. "You have shamed us," the old man said coldly. "Love is for poets, not for those who live and die unseen." Punishment was swift. Ryo was ordered to lead a direct strike against Hana's father himself. It was both a test of loyalty and a sentence for his feelings. Refusal meant death. That night, dressed in black, Ryo stood on a Kuga rooftop, heart heavy with conflict. Hana appeared, tears glinting in the moonlight. "Will you kill my father?" she asked. "I don't know," he whispered. In that pause, Kuga guards spotted him. Alarms rang, steel clashed in the courtyard as Kuga and Iga warriors fought, a storm of shadows, chains, and blades. Ryo fought fiercely, using his kusarigama to disarm rather than kill, desperately trying to survive without taking lives. When dawn came, Ryo was gone, exiled from Iga for disobedience, hunted by Kuga for betrayal. Hana watched from a distance, clutching the Haori cloak he had left behind, knowing their love had set fire to an ancient war. Weeks later, Hana and Ryo met one last time at the edge of a cedar forest, far from both clans. He wore no ninja gear, only a traveler's robe. She carried a small pouch of rice, the only gift she could offer. "I will always be hunted," he said quietly. "And I will always wait," Hana replied, placing the pouch in his hands. They embraced, knowing this was farewell. Rio disappeared into the mountains, a shadow without a clan, while Hana returned to a life under watchful eyes. Their love had not ended hatred between Iga and Koga, but it had shown that even in an age of betrayal, two hearts could choose compassion. Far away, rumors spread about a different conflict, not between ninja, but within sacred temples themselves, where warrior monks, known as Sohei, prepared for a secret war. And in those temples, a monk would soon break his vows because of a wandering Ronin. High on Mount Hiei, where clouds often kissed the cedars, stood Enryakuji, a sprawling temple complex founded centuries earlier to guard Kyoto. But Enryakuji was no ordinary place of worship. It was home to the Sohei, warrior monks who trained not just in meditation and scriptures, but also in warfare. These Sohei carried naginata, long pole arms, and wore armor beneath their monk robes. They were proof that even places of peace could become engines of war. During Japan's feudal era, temples were not only spiritual centers, but also political strongholds, controlling land, wealth, and influence. Enryakuji's Sohei had fought alongside lords and against them, their loyalty tied more to the temple than to any daimyo or shogun. Jin, a young Sohei, had taken vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience. His life followed strict routines, chanting sutras at dawn, tending temple gardens, and drilling with weapons in the afternoon. The philosophy was rooted in Zen Buddhism, teaching detachment from worldly desires. Yet Jin's heart carried unrest. He had been trained to silence thought, but the world outside still whispered.
Kaoru was given a small room in the guest quarters, traditionally reserved for traveling monks and messengers. He spent the first night in silence, watching candlelight dance on the wooden beams. Jin, assigned to oversee guests, brought him rice and miso soup. "You carry yourself like one who has seen war," Jin observed softly. Kaoru looked up, eyes dark as wet ink. "I served a lord once. He is gone. The world does not need men like me anymore." Jin did not answer immediately. He understood the pain behind those words. The Sohei had fought many wars, not all of them noble. And Ryakuji itself had once burned under the wrath of Oda Nobunaga, only to rise again. Proof that even temples were not free of violence. In the following days, Kaoru helped tend the temple grounds, trimming bonsai and carrying water from the spring. His hands, trained for the sword, found new purpose in gentle work. Jin often watched from a distance, noticing the calm settling in Kaoru's movements. There was something oddly healing about a Ronin
finding stillness within temple walls. One evening, while ringing the great bronze bonsho, the temple bell used to mark prayer hours, Jin found Kaoru waiting under the eaves. Rain fell gently, creating a rhythm that blended with the bell's deep tone. "Why did you choose to stay?" Kaoru's answer was a whisper. "Because this is the first place I have felt forgiven." Something stirred in Jin then. Not desire yet, but recognition. Two souls weary of war, finding peace in each other's silence.
Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Jin and Kaoru deepened quietly. It began in small gestures, an extra bowl of rice left at Kaoru's door, Kaoru sharpening Jin's naginata in return. One afternoon, Jin found Kaoru studying a scroll of Zen koans, paradoxical riddles meant to break logical thinking and spark enlightenment. "Why do monks carry weapons?" Kaoru asked. Jin hesitated. "Because even monks must protect life, sometimes with steel." Kaoru smiled faintly. "I thought monks were beyond such things." "Some of us try to be, but the world drags us back." Their conversations grew longer about loss, loyalty, and the meaning of freedom. Kaoru confessed how he at once followed Bushido blindly, only to lose everything. Jin, in turn, spoke about the weight of vows, celibacy, obedience, and poverty that now felt heavier than any armor. One evening, during evening chanting, Kaoru sat at the back of the hall, listening to the rhythmic recitation of sutras. The soft chorus wrapped around him like a warm cloth, yet his eyes sought only Jin. When Jin caught his gaze, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, an acknowledgement that what they felt was dangerous, yet undeniable. It happened on a rainy night. Thunder rolled across the mountains, and the temple bells echoed in response. Jin found Kaoru in the meditation garden, drenched and trembling. "Why are you out here?" Jin asked, stepping closer. Kaoru's voice cracked. "Because I don't belong anywhere, Jin, except maybe near you." The words cut deeper than any blade. Jin stood frozen, torn between his vows and the ache in his chest. He reached out, pulling Kaoru from the rain beneath the wooden eaves. For a long moment, neither spoke, the sound of rain filling the silence. When Jin finally kissed him, it was not passion, but relief, a surrender of burdens they both carried too long. That kiss was both a beginning and an ending, the breaking of a monk's vow and the quiet start of something forbidden, yet profoundly human. But peace never lasted in the Sengoku era. Word spread of a regional warlord seeking to seize temple lands. Enryakuji prepared for war again, calling the Sohei to arms. Jin faced a cruel choice: remain with Kaoru and abandon his temple, or take up arms and become again the weapon he once tried to lay down. The war drums echoed below the mountain, a grim reminder that the era of peace was still far away. Jin stood at the temple gate, naginata in hand, Kaoru beside him. "I can't let them destroy this place," Jin said softly. Kaoru nodded, though his eyes glistened. "And I can't let you fight alone." For one fleeting day, they fought side by side, monk and Ronin, against mercenaries seeking to burn the temple. When the battle ended, Jin's robes were torn, his vows already shattered, yet he felt strangely whole. But Kaoru could not stay. A Ronin's life was wandering, and Jin's duty bound him to Enryakuji, no matter how much he longed otherwise. They parted at dawn, the great Bonsho bell ringing behind them, a sound that seemed to bless and mourn all at once. Jin watched Kaoru disappear into the mist, knowing some vows can be broken, but never forgotten. And somewhere far below the mountain, in the bustling streets of Edo, a different kind of forbidden love was waiting to unfold.
The city of Edo, under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate, was a paradox of wealth and control. Merchants known as chonin filled the streets with silk, spices, and exotic goods imported through secret trade routes. Though they grew wealthy, the rigid social order of the Edo period placed merchants at the very bottom, beneath samurai, peasants, and artisans. Samurai were honored for their service, peasants for their food production, artisans for their craft. Merchants, however, were often seen as people who produced nothing and merely profited from others. Among these chonin families was Takeda Ichiro, a wealthy silk trader whose fortune could rival small lords. His only daughter, Aya, embodied both grace and quiet strength. She often helped in the family shop, arranging bolts of silk so fine they caught every flicker of lantern light. Aya, however, longed for something beyond commerce. She loved literature, tea ceremonies, chanoyu, and moonlit haiku readings. Aya's world changed when she was invited to deliver a silk commission to Edo Castle, the political heart of Japan. There she met Lord Tetsuya, heir to the shogun himself. Tetsuya had been raised in strict tradition, kenjutsu training from childhood, etiquette lessons, and endless lectures on governance. But in Aya, he saw someone untouched by politics, a person who saw him not as the future ruler, but as a man. Their eyes met in the grand audience hall, where even whispers carried weight. Aya bowed deeply, the way all commoners must before the ruling class. But when she looked up, Tetsuya smiled, softly, rebelliously.
Aya returned to Edo Castle several times under the pretext of silk deliveries. Each visit brought her closer to Tetsuya. They spoke in carefully measured tones, aware that walls in castles often had ears. One afternoon, Tetsuya guided Aya through the Ninomaru Garden, a carefully manicured space filled with koi ponds, stone lanterns, and cherry trees. "Do you know why these gardens exist?" he asked, his voice soft. Aya smiled. "To show harmony between man and nature?" Tetsuya nodded. "Yes, but they also remind us, those of us inside these walls, that beauty must be controlled, trimmed, and shaped, just like power."
Aya sensed the sadness beneath his words. Despite his status as heir, Tetsuya was also trapped. He had no freedom to choose his friends, his love, or even his path in life. She wanted to say something comforting, but hesitated, knowing her position as the daughter of a merchant was unworthy in the eyes of the court. That evening, when Aya returned home, her father noticed her quiet smile. "Aya," he said firmly, "remember who you are. We are chonin, merchants. Stay away from power. It consumes those who touch it." But it was already too late. Aya and Tetsuya had exchanged not just words, but a bond neither silk nor steel could sever. The relationship deepened during a spring tea ceremony hosted within Edo Castle. The Chano-yu was performed by Tetsuya himself, a skill uncommon for a man of his station, but one he cherished. He knelt with perfect form, whisking the matcha until foam blossomed at the surface. Aya watched every movement, controlled, deliberate, yet graceful. "Why do you serve tea for me?" Aya whispered when attendants stepped away. "Because it is the one thing I can choose," Tetsuya replied, eyes soft. That night, they met secretly in one of the castle's smaller watchtowers, overlooking the lantern-lit city below. "If they discover us," Aya hesitated. "They will," Tetsuya said, "but I don't care." For a moment, they held each other in silence, the smell of tatami mats and cedar walls surrounding them. Aya thought of the rigid class system, samurai at the top, followed by farmers, artisans, and only then merchants. She was at the bottom, yet her heart felt higher than any rank could measure. In that instant, she realized that love could exist even in a world built to deny it. Whispers spread quickly. Courtiers noticed Tetsuya's unusual warmth toward a merchant's daughter. Some called it scandalous, others dangerous. If their bond became public, it could disrupt the social fabric the Tokugawa had spent decades building. One evening, Tetsuya was summoned before the Shogun himself. "You are heir to this house," the Shogun said. "Would you throw it away for a girl who sells silk?" Tetsuya stood firm. "She is more than silk." The room went silent. Such defiance was unheard of. That night, Aya was warned by a sympathetic maid. "Leave Edo before it's too late. They will not spare you." Aya fled to her father's country estate, heart heavy with sorrow. Tetsuya, under constant watch, could no longer leave the castle. Their love, like the finest silk, was beautiful but delicate, easily torn by the sharp edge of power. Months passed. Tetsuya finally broke free from his guards and traveled in disguise to find Aya. When he arrived at the estate, she was weaving silk herself, hands steady but eyes tired. "You came," she whispered. "I would defy the Shogun himself," Tetsuya said, taking her hands, "because what we have is stronger than their walls." But they both knew the cost. Their love would never be fully accepted, but it would always be theirs, soft as silk, unbreakable as steel. Far away, in another part of Japan, a Ronin was about to meet a girl from a world he could never enter, the daughter of a merchant who would one day inherit secrets powerful enough to topple a shogun. And so begins a new story of class, power, and love. A nameless love. The countryside of Edo, Japan, seemed peaceful, but its quietness often hid hardship. Villages struggled under heavy taxation imposed by the Tokugawa shogunate, where farmers were required to pay rice tribute, nengu, regardless of bad harvests. When the rains failed and crops withered, people often starved while officials still collected their dues. In one such village lived Hane, a young woman known for her kindness and her skill at weaving minka-style straw mats. She lived alone after her parents died of illness, tending a small rice paddy that barely produced enough to sustain her. Despite hardship, she smiled often, her spirit unbroken like the bamboo that lined the village paths. One evening, Hane found a stranger collapsed near the edge of her field. He wore a worn kimono and carried a katana wrapped in cloth. His face was weathered, eyes closed from exhaustion. Hane dragged him into her modest home, giving him water and food. When he awoke, he introduced himself simply as Renji. No family name, no title. What Hane did not know was that Renji was a Ronin, a samurai without a master, often seen as dangerous vagabonds during the Edo era. Many Ronin had fallen into crime or mercenary work after losing their lords in war or political intrigue. Renji, however, carried a past soaked in blood and betrayal, one he desperately tried to leave behind. For weeks, Renji stayed, helping Hane tend her field. He repaired her tools, cut firewood, and joined the villagers during the autumn harvest festival, a celebration marked by lanterns, taiko drums, and prayers of gratitude. Though his face rarely smiled, Hane noticed his hands trembled whenever he touched the katana he kept hidden. Autumn deepened, painting the rice fields gold. The villagers worked tirelessly, bending over the paddies to cut stalks with sickles before the rains came. Renji worked alongside Hane, his strong arms carrying more than his share of bundles. At first, the villagers eyed him with suspicion. His rough hands and soldier's posture were out of place among farmers used to slow, deliberate work. But Renji was humble. He accepted even the dirtiest tasks, clearing ditches, holding water, and fixing roofs. One evening, as the village gathered for the harvest festival, a time of drumming, lantern lighting, and dancing, Renji quietly watched from the edge. Hane approached, handing him a cup of warm amazake, sweet rice wine served during celebrations. "You've done more than enough for us," she said softly. "You're welcome here." Renji looked away, his face shadowed. "If you knew who I really was, you might not say that." Hane tilted her head, her expression calm but firm. "You are who you choose to be now, not who you were." For the first time in years, Renji felt a strange warmth, something deeper than gratitude. That night, as paper lanterns floated on the river and villagers prayed for next year's harvest, Renji silently vowed to protect Hane and this village, no matter the cost. Peace never lasts long for men who carry swords. One winter morning, two travelers arrived, wearing the distinct stance of former soldiers. They recognized Renji immediately. "You," one spat, "you the butcher of Yamashiro." The word spread through the village like wildfire. Rumors painted Renji as a killer who had betrayed his lord, slaughtering not only enemies but innocents during a failed rebellion. Hanae confronted him that evening. "Is it true?" she asked quietly, hands trembling. Renji stared at the floor. "I followed orders until I couldn't. I killed men, Hanae, too many, and when my lord fell, I ran. I thought I could bury that life here." Tears welled in Hanae's eyes, but she stepped closer. "That was war. This is peace. Which life do you choose now?" Her words pierced deeper than any sword. For the first time, Renji spoke openly of his regret, of the faces he couldn't forget. Hanae listened, not with judgment, but with silence, a silence that felt like absolution. Trouble came swiftly. Bandits, hearing of the village's grain stores, attacked one snowy night. Renji stood in the center of the square, katana drawn, a man who had vowed never to kill again, but now faced no choice. The fight was brutal but short. Renji's skill, honed through years of war, turned the tide. Yet he fought differently now, striking to disarm, to disable, never to kill unless no other option remained. When the bandits fled, the villagers gathered, staring at him not with fear, but gratitude. Hanae approached, holding his trembling hand. "You stayed," she whispered. Renji looked at her, the weight of his past lifting slightly. "For you, I will stay as long as I am allowed." The headman offered him a place among them, not as a samurai, but as a protector, a farmer with a sword only for emergencies. For the first time in years, Renji felt he had a home. Seasons passed. Renji and Hanae worked side by side, planting seedlings, repairing dikes, and celebrating festivals. Their love grew quietly, without titles, without recognition, just a Ronin who had shed his name and a farmer's daughter who saw him as he truly was. One spring morning, Hanae placed a small woven amulet in his hands. "You don't need a name for me to know who you are," she whispered. Renji smiled for the first time in years. He no longer needed to run. The village was his home, and Hanae his heart. Far away, however, power shifted. In Edo, alliances formed and broke like waves, and a young noblewoman was about to challenge the very order of power itself. The era of the Genpei War was a rare moment when women took up arms alongside men. These female warriors, known as Geisha, were often noble women trained in martial arts to defend their households during times of war. Their weapon of choice was the naginata, a polearm with a curved blade, well suited for both reach and maneuverability. Among them was Lady Kaede, daughter of a minor lord loyal to the Taira clan. Her hair was tied in a warrior's knot, her armor lighter than that of men, allowing speed over brute strength. On the opposing side was Lady Rina, a fierce retainer of the Minamoto clan, known for her precision strikes and unmatched endurance on the battlefield. They first met in combat during a skirmish on a misty plain. Kaede's naginata swept low, Rina's blade countered with perfect timing. Sparks flew, not from steel, but from the sudden recognition of equals. Neither spoke, But in the brief clash of eyes, something shifted. That night, Kaede sat by the campfire, troubled. She had seen countless foes, yet Rina's presence lingered. "She fights like water flowing over stone," she whispered to herself. Rina, too, remembered the encounter, her thoughts unsettled by the grace of an enemy she could not hate. In the following weeks, the two clans clashed repeatedly. Each time Kaede and Rina met on the battlefield, their strikes were fierce, but their eyes carried hesitation. Soldiers on both sides whispered about the mysterious rhythm between the two female warriors, how their duels seemed like dances rather than fights to the death. One evening, after a rain-soaked battle, Kaede was separated from her unit and wounded. She limped into a grove of bamboo, expecting death to come from any direction. Instead, Rina appeared, her blade drawn, but she did not strike. "You should finish it," Kaede said, her voice barely audible. Rina lowered her naginata. "I don't kill for sport," she whispered, tearing cloth from her own armor to bind Kaede's wound. "Besides, I can't bring myself to kill you." From that night, their meetings changed. Under the cover of darkness, they spoke in secret about life beyond war, about poetry and the tea ceremonies they had both once attended as noblewomen. Rina revealed how her father had trained her not just to fight, but to lead. Kaede confessed that she often dreamed of a world where loyalty to family did not mean eternal hatred of strangers. Each secret meeting planted seeds of something dangerous: compassion and eventually love. As winter approached, their relationship deepened. They met in abandoned shrines and quiet riverbanks, sharing moments that had nothing to do with war. Kaede once brought Rina a folded sensu fan with a poem she had written. Two blades meet, not to kill, but to protect. Yet danger grew. Rumors reached the ears of commanders who questioned why these two warriors never killed each other despite countless encounters. Suspicion turned into investigation. During one battle, Kaede hesitated when ordered to lead an ambush against Rina's unit. She diverted her strike, saving Rina's life, but compromising her own mission. Afterward, Kaide's commander confronted her. "Your hesitation cost lives. Do not forget who you fight for." That night, Kaede confessed everything to Rina. "We are living a lie," Kaede said, tears glistening under the moonlight. "If they discover us, we will both die." Rina held her close. "Then let us choose our own battle, to love despite them all." Their secret unraveled during a major battle near the river Kiso. A rival warrior witnessed Cade shield Rina from an incoming spear, taking a wound meant for her. By sunset, both women were captured by their own clans, accused of betrayal. In the war council, Kaede's father shouted, "You dishonor our bloodline for an enemy." Meanwhile, Rina's commander called her a traitor, blinded by lust. They were given one choice: kill each other to prove loyalty. Bound by chains, standing under the cold eyes of their clans, they faced one another. Kaede whispered, "Do you regret this?" Rina shook her head. "Never, even if this is our end." But before the execution, chaos erupted. Minamoto and Taira reinforcements clashed, and in the confusion, the women escaped together, fleeing into the mountains. In the remote mountains, Kaide and Rina discarded their clan colors, living as wanderers. They trained daily, not for war, but for survival. In their quiet moments, they crafted a vow. No clan, no war, only us. Their story spread in whispers, becoming a legend. Two women who defied tradition, hatred, and even death for love. While war raged far below, they lived in peace. Naginatas crossed only in sparring, never in anger. Far away in the court of Kyoto, another forbidden romance stirred, this time involving a princess tied to a dangerous political conspiracy that could shake the empire itself. The manor of Lord Hirotaka stood on a hill overlooking vast rice fields, a symbol of his power as a daimyo, a feudal lord during the Edo period. Daimyo governed lands on behalf of the Shogun, maintaining strict order through retainers and servants. Every hall echoed discipline. Tatami mats perfectly aligned, sliding shoji doors spotless, and the kamon, family crest, displayed with solemn pride. In this world of rigid hierarchy lived Akio, a low-ranking servant tasked with maintaining the gardens and preparing Lord Hirotaka's armor. Servants were bound by chujitsu, absolute loyalty and discretion. They spoke only when spoken to and bowed deeply when addressed. One evening, after a long day of military drills, Hirotaka visited the garden. Akio, kneeling by a koi pond, adjusted lanterns for the night. Hirotaka paused, watching how gently the servant handled even the smallest stone. Hirotaka said quietly, "You take great care with things most would overlook." Akio lowered his head. "It is my duty, my lord." Hirotaka studied him for a long moment before leaving. It was a small exchange, but it stirred something unusual, a connection forbidden by rank and tradition.
In the days that followed, Lord Hirotaka began to notice Akio in ways he had never noticed a servant before. She was slender but strong, her movements quiet and precise like falling petals. Her work was meticulous, preparing armor with hands that never trembled, arranging flowers in the receiving hall with an aesthetic balance taught only to those who had studied ikebana, the art of Japanese flower arrangement. Akio had been born to a poor farmer family, but was brought to the manor as a child to serve in domestic duties, a rare opportunity for someone of her station. For women of her background, the daimyo's manor was both prison and sanctuary, a life of constant work, obedience, and silence, but also one free from hunger and bandits. Hirotaka had always been taught to see servants as tools of governance, not individuals. But Akio disrupted that. She did not chatter like other maids, nor did she avert her eyes in fear. Her gaze, when it met his, was respectful yet unflinching.
In those quiet glances, Hirotaka saw not rebellion, but understanding. One rainy afternoon, he dismissed the other attendants and called Akio to bring him tea. She knelt gracefully, poured with precision, and handed him the cup. Hirotaka, instead of drinking, asked Akio, "Akio, why do you serve this household?" She hesitated. Her expected answer was, "It is my duty, my lord." But instead she said softly, "Because this house gave me life when I had none, and because serving you gives me purpose." Her words pierced deeper than Hirotaka expected. No one spoke to him with such candor. Daimyo were feared, obeyed, and flattered, but rarely seen as men. From that day, Hirotaka sought her presence. When she arranged scrolls in the library, when she swept the moonlit veranda, even when she quietly sang old folk songs while working in the garden. He knew the risk. Love between lord and servant was forbidden by Bushido values, which prized loyalty above all, but demanded emotional distance. A daimyo who succumbed to such attachment risked shame, loss of vassals, even forced seppuku, ritual suicide. For the servant, the punishment was harsher, public execution.
Their secret began not with words, but with gestures too small for others to notice. A hand that lingered too long when handing over tea. A glance held for a moment more than protocol allowed. But the manor was a place where silence itself had ears. It was during the annual inspection that everything began to unravel. The Karo, chief retainer of Lord Hirotaka, noticed Hirotaka's unusual attention toward Akio. Normally, a daimyo barely looked at servants unless giving orders, but Hirotaka often paused when Akio passed by. His tone softened when addressing her. The Karo had served the family for decades and knew too well how dangerous affection could be in a household built on honor, meiyu, and hierarchy. One late afternoon, after Akio left the lord's study, the Karo quietly approached Hirotaka. "My lord, forgive my boldness, but your closeness with the girl has raised questions among the attendants. Should it continue, whispers may reach Edo." Hirotaka's jaw tightened. He said nothing, only dismissing the man with a curt nod. But inside, unease took root. That evening, Hirotaka visited the moonlit garden where Akio was trimming bonsai. "They are watching," he said quietly. Akio lowered her shears. "I know." She stepped closer, voice trembling. "Shall I leave?" For a moment, Hirotaka saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of losing not just her position, but her life. Servants accused of shaming their lords often met swift punishment, execution by sword, or worse, public humiliation. But Hirotaka reached out, lifting her chin gently. "No, I will not cast you aside." The next day, rumors spread faster. A maid had seen Hirotaka's hand on Akio's shoulder. Another swore she heard the sound of quiet laughter between them. The manor's whispering corridors, once filled with orderly silence, now buzzed with suspicion. When word finally reached Edo officials, the matter was no longer private. It was a question of honor,
that could affect Hirotaka's standing as a daimyo, for in the world of the samurai, emotion was weakness, and weakness invited downfall.
The shogun's envoy arrived swiftly, bringing with him an edict sealed with the crest of Edo Castle. Hirotaka was summoned to stand before a council of senior officials to answer for the scandal. "Your affection for a servant is unbecoming of a daimyo," the envoy declared. "The law is clear: sever ties to preserve your honor or prepare for the consequences." Hirotaka knelt calmly but firmly replied, "If love for her dishonors me, let the dishonor be mine alone." The council erupted. Such defiance risked not just Hirotaka's life, but his entire clan's standing. Akio, meanwhile, was confined to a storehouse under armed guard. She sat in darkness, clutching the only thing she owned, a small Netsuke charm her late mother had given her. For the first time since childhood, she wept. That night, Hirotaka returned and entered her cell despite protests. Guards hesitated, but the authority in his eyes silenced them. Kneeling before Akio, he whispered, "They want me to choose, but I already have. I choose you." Akio shook her head, tears falling. "You will lose everything, my lord." "I have everything I need here," he said, taking her hands in his. By morning, an official decree was issued. Either Hirotaka relinquished his title and lived in exile, or Akio would be executed and his house stripped of privilege. Honor, that sacred but merciless code, now held them both in chains.
That night, Hirotaka convened his most trusted retainers. Some begged him to abandon Akio for the sake of the clan. Others warned that exile meant poverty, humiliation, and political ruin. Hirotaka listened in silence, then said, "I will not sacrifice her life for my title. We leave tonight." Under the cover of darkness, Hirotaka disguised himself in travel clothes, while Akio shed her servant's uniform, wearing a plain kimono. They left through a side gate, guided only by the faint light of paper lanterns. As they descended the hill toward the border of his lands, Akio whispered, "You gave up everything for me." Hirotaka smiled faintly. "No, Akio, I found everything I ever wanted." They settled in a remote province, far from the politics of Edo, tending to a small farm. The life was humble, planting rice, mending fences, and fetching water from the stream. Yet it was peaceful. Hirotaka, once surrounded by soldiers and ceremony, now found solace in simple mornings, watching Akio hang laundry in the sun. Still, at night there were moments of silence heavy with memory. The house crest he no longer bore, the retainers who had served him loyally, the future he had abandoned. But each time doubt whispered, he would reach for Akio's hand and remember why he had chosen this path. Their love, once forbidden, became their greatest freedom, proof that even in a world bound by honor and hierarchy, the heart could carve out its own destiny.
Kyoto's Gion district was a maze of narrow cobblestone streets glowing under rows of soft paper lanterns. Behind discreet wooden facades lay the ochaya, exclusive tea houses
where the elite gathered for refined entertainment. Inside, the art of the geisha reigns supreme. Not just music and dance, but witty conversation, poetry recitals, and the graceful rituals of the tea ceremony, chanoyu. While most people thought of geisha as women, there was another tradition, the taikomochi, or male geisha. Historically, taikomochi were storytellers and entertainers, skilled at music and humorous conversation. By this era, they were fewer than their female counterparts, but in Kyoto's old Ochaya, some still held high regard. One such taikomochi was Renji. He was renowned for his quick wit, his shamisen skills, and his ability to turn a dull gathering into a night of laughter and meaning. Across the street from his Ochaya worked Sayuri, a celebrated female geisha known for her elegant tea ceremonies and ethereal dance performances. Traditionally, male and female geisha did not mix socially beyond formal events, and relationships of intimacy were explicitly forbidden. Their art demanded emotional distance. They were companions to clients, not to one another. Yet one spring evening, destiny intervened. A wealthy Kyoto merchant, eager to impress visiting samurai, hired both Renji and Sayuri for the same banquet, a rare pairing intended to display Kyoto's finest talent. That night, Renji shamisen melodies wove seamlessly into Sayuri's delicate fan dance. For a brief moment, their eyes met in rhythm, and something unspoken passed between them. After the banquet, when guests left and lanterns dimmed, Renji lingered outside under the paper lantern swaying in the spring breeze. Sayuri emerged, her kanjashi hairpin catching the glow. For a moment, they simply stood there. Two artists from rival houses, bound by rules and silence, yet unable to ignore the spark that had lit during their performance. In the world of geisha, love was not just forbidden, it was dangerous. But as they parted that night, both carried the same quiet thought, I want to see you again.
Renji and Sayuri's worlds orbited around tradition, ceremony, and the invisible boundaries that shaped Kyoto's Ochaya culture. The taikomochi, like Renji, were entertainers, often tasked with humor, music, and engaging conversation. Female geisha, like Sayuri, focused on elegance, tea ceremonies, dance, and refined artistry. Their worlds were complementary but separate, and romance between performers was unspoken and frowned upon. Yet after that shared performance, neither could forget the spark. Sayuri found herself listening for Renji's shamisen across the narrow alley that separated their Ochaya houses. Renji, meanwhile, lingered in markets, hoping to glimpse her among silk merchants and hairpin stalls. Their encounters remained brief, polite, bowed heads, exchanged greetings, and nothing more, but their eyes spoke volumes. One rainy evening, Renji left his engagement early and walked toward the Yasaka Shrine, a common place for geisha to pray for good fortune before seasonal festivals. There he found Sayuri alone, adjusting her kanzashi under the shelter of the shrine gate. You always play like your heart is on fire, Sayuri said softly, surprising even herself. Renji smiled faintly, and you pour tea like you're calming the world itself. For a moment, Silence embraced them, broken only by the soft patter of rain on stone. But silence was dangerous. Behind the delicate shoji walls of their lives, whispers traveled fast. Already some attendants had noticed how Renji lingered near Sayuri during joint engagements, how her laughter came easier when he was present. In an industry where reputation was everything, such whispers could end careers. Sayuri hesitated before speaking again. "We shouldn't, yet I don't want to stop seeing you." Renji's eyes softened. "Then don't. We will find a way, quietly." That night, as they parted under the rain-soaked lanterns, their hands brushed, an innocent gesture, yet one that burned hotter than any confession. They began meeting in secret, choosing moments when the streets of Gion grew quiet. Late at night, after clients had gone, when only the faint scent of incense and sake lingered in the air. They shared simple things, Renji playing a soft shamisen melody while Sayuri practiced a slow fan dance, or Sayuri teaching Renji the finer points of the tea ceremony, laughing when his hands trembled holding the ladle. For Renji, who spent his nights making others laugh, Sayuri was the one person who saw past the mask. For Sayuri, burdened by the expectation of eternal poise, Renji's laughter felt like freedom. But their world had no mercy for love. Geisha were bound by strict codes. They could entertain, they could charm, but their hearts had to remain untouched. If word of their relationship reached their okiya, geisha houses, both would face severe punishment, termination of contracts, public disgrace, perhaps even permanent exile from Gion. Despite this, their bond deepened. They exchanged gifts, a small netsuku charm from Renji, a silk handkerchief from Sayuri. These tokens were hidden carefully, like contraband in a world where affection was a crime. One evening, Sayuri confessed her fear. "Renji, if they find out, we will lose everything." Renji took her hand. "I have already decided. I would rather lose my shamisen than lose you." Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled. In that hidden room lit by a single paper lantern, their hearts burned brighter than the rules that sought to contain them. It was inevitable. Whispers grew into rumors. One night, a fellow geisha overheard laughter in an unused tea room and saw shadows moving behind the paper wall. The next day, both Renji and Sayuri noticed unusual glances from their peers. Conversations hushed when they entered rooms. The Ochaya world was one of silence, but silence could cut deeper than any accusation. Sayuri's Okasan, house mother, confronted her first. "Your reputation is your life. Do not ruin it with foolishness," she warned, eyes sharp as a drawn blade. Renji's master issued similar words. "We are entertainers, not lovers. Do you understand the risk you put us all in?" For days, the two avoided each other in public, fearing what might come next, but distance only made the longing worse. One evening, Sayuri risked everything, slipping a note under Renji's door. "Meet me at the Kamo River Bridge tonight." They met under moonlight, the sound of rushing water masking their voices. "We can't keep hiding like this," Sayuri said, tears catching in the lantern glow. Renji nodded. "Then let's not hide." But the choice to stand together came with a price neither could yet measure. The scandal spread faster than falling cherry blossoms in a spring storm. Patrons whispered, attendants gossiped, and both Ochaya houses faced uncomfortable questions. Is it true, a male geisha and a female geisha, lovers? For Renji and Sayuri, the choice came swiftly. They could deny everything and keep their positions, living under the constant shadow of lies, or they could tell the truth and face whatever storm would follow. That evening, beneath the same lanterns where their eyes had first met, they chose truth. Renji bowed before his housemaster. I will no longer serve as taikomochi here. My loyalty is not to contracts, but to her. Sayuri too laid down her ornate hairpins and folded her obi carefully, returning them to her okasan. Both households reacted as expected. Icy silence, then formal dismissal papers. Their names would no longer be listed in Gion's registry of active entertainers. They were, by the standards of their world, erased. Yet, as they walked out of Gion together, hands clasped under the lantern light, Renji whispered, "For the first time, I feel free." Sayuri smiled, eyes wet but bright. "So do I." They settled far outside Kyoto, in a small riverside town. Renji used his shamisen to entertain travelers, not for prestige, but for joy. Sayuri performed dances and tea ceremonies, not to impress patrons, but to celebrate moments of simple living. Their love, once forbidden and dangerous, became the heartbeat of their new life. But freedom came with a strange weight. Some nights, Sayuri would sit by the lantern outside their modest tea house, gazing at the stars, remembering the soft glow of Gion and the world they left behind. Renji often joined her, resting the shamisen on his knee. "Do you regret it?" he would ask. She always shook her head. "No, because I chose you." One rainy evening, a traveler arrived, an imperial messenger on his way north. He carried news of political turmoil. A prince of the imperial bloodline had secretly visited Kyoto and was caught in a scandal involving a woman imprisoned under mysterious charges. Some said she was a spy, others whispered she was innocent and framed by court rivals. Whatever the truth, it was said the prince risked his own life to protect her. Renji listened quietly as the messenger sipped warm tea. Sayuri exchanged a glance with him. They both knew what that meant. Their personal story of breaking rules was only one among countless hidden loves and rebellions that quietly reshaped history. That night, under the lantern light outside their tea house, Sayuri whispered, "Do you think love is always a rebellion?" Renji smiled. "No, sometimes love is simply truth finding its way out of chains." Far away, the prince's choice and the prisoner's fate were about to shake the imperial court itself, and with it, the fragile balance of power across Japan.
The prison fortress loomed like a stone beast on the edge of Edo's political landscape. Built during the early Tokugawa era, it held those accused of treason, espionage, or political conspiracy. Its walls, made of massive granite blocks, were said to echo the cries of men who never returned. Inside, cells were sparse, tatami mats often replaced by bare stone floors, shackles bolted into walls, and heavy iron-barred doors that left no privacy, only survival. Prisoners were classified. Common criminals in outer blocks, political detainees in the inner sanctum under constant watch by armed yoriki, senior samurai police. It was here that Lady Hana, once a court attendant to a powerful minister, had been imprisoned.
The official record accused her of conspiring with rebels, providing them with coded documents and secret routes. Whether the accusations were true or fabricated by political rivals, no one outside the court knew. Prince Karu, a distant cousin of the Shogun, first learned of her case through secret correspondence. The message he received from a loyal retainer read, "The woman's crime is uncertain, but her resolve unbroken. She has refused to confess despite torture." The prince had never met her, yet something in those words stirred him. Perhaps it was curiosity, perhaps a sense of injustice. Whatever the reason, one late evening he disguised himself as a junior magistrate and entered the fortress. In a dim-lit cell lit only by a single oil lamp, he saw her. Shackled at the wrists, her hair matted but her gaze sharp, Lady Hana looked up and met his eyes. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly, her voice unbroken despite weeks in chains. Karu, feeling the weight of her words, replied, "And yet I am."
The next evening, Prince Karu returned, still disguised as a junior magistrate. He brought no guards, only a small cloth bundle containing fruit and warm rice balls, a luxury within those cold walls. When he entered Hana's cell, she stared at him in silence, as though deciding whether to speak. "You risk much for a stranger," she finally said, her voice low but sharp. Karu knelt, placing the food within reach. "I don't believe you are guilty," he said softly. "The evidence against you was too convenient, too swift." Hana laughed bitterly. "Belief changes nothing. This fortress was built not for truth, but for silence. Those brought here disappear, whether guilty or not." She lifted her wrists, showing bruises left by iron shackles. "Do you think your pity can free me?" Karu met her gaze steadily. "Not pity, choice. I can choose to see you, to listen when the rest of them look away." It was the first real conversation they shared. Over the next week, Karu returned, each time bringing small comforts: clean cloth for her bruises, a warm drink smuggled from the kitchen, even snippets of news from outside. He learned that Hana had once served as a courier between noble households, trusted for her quick thinking and perfect memory. Her arrest, she claimed, came after she overheard something she should not have: ministers conspiring to manipulate imperial succession. "I didn't act," she whispered one night, eyes glimmering in the dim light. "I only knew, and that knowledge was enough to chain me." Karu listened, anger simmering beneath his calm. In her he saw not a criminal, but a woman trapped by the same politics that bound him. He too was only a prince because factions allowed it. That night, as he left the cell, Hana said quietly, "Whatever you're thinking, don't. They will destroy you as easily as they destroyed me." Karu paused, looking back at her shackled figure. "Maybe I am already destroyed if I walk away." Kayoru's visits could not stay secret forever. The guards began to whisper, and one night an anonymous letter arrived at his private residence. "End your visits or your rank will be stripped." Instead of retreating, Kayoru investigated Hana's case more deeply. Using his status, he gained access to restricted archives. There he found forged signatures and altered testimony, clear evidence of a political plot. Someone had needed Hana silenced because she knew too much about a meeting involving key ministers and the Shogun's senior advisors. he sought counsel from his most trusted ally, Lord Itsuro, an older samurai who had served Kaoru's father. "You tread on dangerous ground," Itsuro warned. "If you pull at this thread, the fabric of the shogunate itself may unravel." Kaoru's answer was quiet but firm. "Then let it unravel." Meanwhile, Hana's health declined from confinement. Kaoru convinced a sympathetic doctor to treat her secretly and bribed guards to loosen her chains during the night. These small acts of kindness only deepened Hana's conflicted feelings. "Why are you doing this?" she asked one night, voice breaking. "Because you deserve to be free, and because I can't stop caring for you." That was the first time silence turned into something else, an unspoken acknowledgement that their bond had crossed the line from empathy to love.
Koru realized there was no legal way to free Hana. Every petition was blocked by political enemies, so he devised another plan, an escape. Late one night, he approached Hana's cell, accompanied by Itsuro and 2 loyal retainers. He said, "Are you ready to leave this place forever?" Hana stared at him. "If I go, you become a traitor." He replied, "I am already a traitor to a system that imprisoned you for knowing the truth." They neutralized 2 guards with sleeping powder and forged release documents bearing Koru's seal. Under the cover of darkness, they left the fortress and fled toward a hidden estate in the mountains. For the first time in months, Hana felt fresh wind on her face. But their flight could not stay hidden. By morning, an arrest order was issued. Prince Koru wanted for aiding a criminal and treasonous conspiracy. The empire itself now stood against him. In the safety of the mountain hideout, Koru and Hana shared a quiet moment. She whispered, "I don't know what comes next." Koru took her hand. "We take back what was stolen, your freedom, and maybe this nation's soul."
News of Kaoru's defiance spread quickly. Peasants whispered of a prince who chose love over duty. Samurai debated whether he was a hero or a fool, and hidden political factions began sending secret messages. "We support you. The shogunate has grown corrupt." Kaoru had not intended to start a rebellion, but the moment he chose Hana over his title, the chain of events could no longer be stopped. In the mountain estate, Hana watched as messengers arrived daily, pledging support. "This isn't just about me anymore," she said quietly. "No," Kaoru replied, gazing at the horizon. "It's about all of us who've been chained." As spring came, the mountains bloomed with wild roses, surrounding the once secret hideout with color and scent. Kaoru named their cause Chains and Roses, a vow to break oppression and reclaim beauty. But even as they planned, the shogunate gathered its forces. Armored troops marched toward the region, and spies infiltrated the villages near the hideout. A single choice had become the spark of a war that would decide not only their fate, but the future of the empire itself. During Japan's Sengoku period, a time of endless war and shifting alliances, honor and loyalty were valued above life itself. Families rose and fell with the stroke of a sword, and love often bent to politics. In this landscape lived Lady Ayame, daughter of Lord Takamura, who ruled a fortified estate in the eastern valleys. Across the river sworn enemy Lord Ishida commanded his own warriors, their banners painted with a crimson sun. It was at a spring festival meant to celebrate the spring's first rice planting, where Lady Ayame first met Riku, a young retainer of Lord Ishida. He wore lamellar armor, small iron plates laced together with silk cord, flexible yet strong, favored by samurai for centuries. Though enemies by name, the festival was neutral ground, a rare moment when even rival families could mingle without swords drawn. Riku had been tasked to escort an elder to the festival shrine, yet his eyes caught Ayame's as she arranged flowers at a ceremonial altar. That single glance held too much meaning: curiosity, admiration, and the silent knowledge that their lives stood on opposite sides of a battlefield. In the weeks that followed, they exchanged secret letters delivered by a traveling monk who thought he was carrying simple prayers. They met at night near the river, hiding among the torii gates and whispering dreams of peace. "If the world were different," Riku once said, "I would ask your hand openly, not behind shadows." Ayame smiled sadly. If the world were different, there would be no enemies. But love in the Sengoku era was a dangerous luxury. The rigid Bushido code demanded loyalty to one's lord above all else, and betrayal, even emotional, could mean death by seppuku. When their secret was discovered, it would not just threaten their lives, but shake the balance of power between their clans.
The first sign of trouble came when one of Lord Takamura's scouts, tasked with observing enemy movement, spotted Ayame at the riverbank late at night. At first, he thought she was praying under the torii gate, a common sight among noblewomen. But then he saw Riku in the colors of House Ishida kneeling beside her. The scout said nothing that night, but by dawn, word had reached the Takamura command post. Honor was everything in Sengoku Japan. For a samurai lord, loyalty of family members was as binding as the loyalty of retainers. A daughter consorting with the enemy, even without exchanging military secrets, brought dishonor that could ripple through alliances and affect morale on the battlefield. Lord Takamura summoned Ayame immediately. "You have shamed our house," he said, his voice trembling with restrained rage. "Do you love him?" Ayame stood tall, surprising even herself with her courage. "Yes," she said simply. The silence that followed was heavier than any blade. In that moment, Takamura made a decision that would alter history. From this day forward, he declared, House Takamura will sever all talks of peace with Ishida. There will be no tolerance for betrayal. On the other side of the river, Lord Ishida received similar intelligence. Unlike Takamura, who had once hoped for diplomatic negotiation, Ishida was already inclined toward aggression. "If they see us as dishonorable already, then let us wear that dishonor as armor. We march." The two families began rapid mobilization. Blacksmiths worked day and night forging yari spears and katana, armorers tightened the laces of lamellar cuirasses, and generals studied triple-line formations, often used in skirmishes resembling smaller versions of the famed Battle of Sekigahara. Meanwhile, Ayame was confined to her room, guarded at all times. Riku was demoted to a lower watch post, effectively stripping him of mobility. From opposite ends of a valley soon to be drenched in blood, they wrote final letters,
hidden in the folds of their clothing. Whatever comes, my heart is yours.
Within days, the Takamura army marched with 300 samurai and 500 Ashigaru foot soldiers. Across the river, Ishida rallied a similar number, creating what locals called a Sekigahara in miniature. Banners of black and crimson faced each other across fields that had once grown rice and barley. Ayame, though confined, could hear the drum signals and conch shells calling warriors to battle. She pleaded with her father, "Do not do this, do not spill blood for my sake." But Takamura, bound by samurai honor, could not relent. "This is no longer about you. This is about our name." The two armies met at dawn. Ryuku reinstated that the front lines wore armor freshly polished, the laced iron plates shining under early light. He wielded a yari spear, its blade gleaming like ice. Takamura's forces formed a gyorin, fish-scale formation, a flexible battle array designed to absorb cavalry charges. Ishida countered with a kakuyoku, crane wing formation, intending to encircle. The clash was deafening. Arrows darkened the sky. Tanegashima matchlock rifles fired in staggered volleys, and warriors clashed sword to sword in brutal melee. Ryuku fought fiercely, but his eyes searched the battlefield's edge where he hoped, impossibly, to see Ayame. She was there, having slipped past her guards to stand on a hill overlooking the carnage. Her heart wrenched at every cry, at the sight of armor shattering and banners falling. By sunset, both sides had suffered heavy casualties, and the battle ended without a decisive victor. Yet something had shifted. Hatred now ran too deep for peace to return. Even those who had hesitated at war were now hardened by loss. That night, Ryuku sought Ayame in secret again, this time blood-stained and trembling. He said, "This cannot go on. One of us must stop it, even if it means." He didn't finish, but Ayame understood, even if it meant betraying their families for the sake of peace. Ayame and Riku met at the riverbank where their love began. "I will speak to my father," Ayame said. "If he listens, there might still be peace." But when she approached Lord Takamura, he refused to see her. "You chose dishonor over blood," he declared. "From this day, you are no daughter of mine." With nowhere left to turn, Ayame and Riku made the unthinkable choice to flee together and seek sanctuary in a neutral temple. There, monks granted them temporary refuge, but warned, "Your families will not forgive this. Prepare for pursuit." Sure enough, within days, armed retainers from both houses hunted them. In one desperate skirmish on a forest path, Riku was injured protecting Ayame from an arrow. She tore her silk sleeve to bind his wound, whispering through tears, "This is my fault." "No," Riku gasped. "This is war's fault." The lovers pressed on, reaching a remote valley. But even here, peace eluded them.
Scouts from both clans finally cornered the couple. In that tense standoff, Ayame stepped forward, shouting, "If you wish for blood, take mine. End this cycle." Her courage stunned the retainers, halting their blades. Yet this momentary pause was broken by news from the Takamura command. Lord Ishida himself had been slain in a surprise night raid. The war, already personal, had now escalated beyond reconciliation.
The death of Lord Ishida ignited an inferno. Without a leader, Ishida's warriors blamed Takamura entirely, and vows of vengeance echoed through every campfire. Takamura's men, hardened by losses, embraced total war. Ayame and Riku, now fugitives, watched as entire villages armed themselves, farmers forging spears from plowshares, and warriors donning kabuto helmets and sode shoulder guards polished for all-out battle. "This is no longer about us," Riku said, grief in his voice. "This is a war fed by hatred itself." The final clash came weeks later, mirroring a miniature Sekigahara, complete with complex pincer maneuvers and volleys of arrows blotting the sky. By the end, neither side held clear victory, only corpses and sorrow littering the fields. In the aftermath, Ayame and Riku disappeared into legend. Some said they fled to the mountains and lived out their lives in peace. Others claimed they died in each other's arms on that final battlefield. What endured was their story, a forbidden love that ignited war, teaching future generations how a single human bond can reshape history. Years later, in a humble farming village far from any battlefield, whispers emerged of a ghost who embraced lonely farmers under the moonlight, offering comfort and sorrow in equal measure. Some said it was Ayame, still searching for Riku. Others believed it was the spirit of a peasant who had lost everything to that war. And thus begins another tale. In a remote fishing village along Japan's eastern coast, legends clung to the waves as tightly as barnacles to a ship's hull. The people there lived by the sea and died by it. Storms took fathers and wars took sons. Among these tales was one of the Hanaura ghost, a spirit said to wander the rocky shore on moonlit nights, weeping for the life she had lost. The village itself was simple: wooden houses with thatched roofs, Shinto shrines adorned with shimenawa, sacred ropes to ward off evil, and a single torii gate marking the path to a cliffside temple. Every summer, during Obon, the festival to honor ancestral spirits, villagers lit toro nagashi, paper lanterns, and sent them drifting onto the water, guiding souls back to the other side. It was during such an Obon that Haruto, a young farmer, first saw her. He had gone to the shore late at night to retrieve a fishing net washed ashore when he heard faint singing. The melody was soft, ancient, carrying the sorrow of centuries. There, standing on the wet sand, was a woman in a tattered white kimono, her hair long and loose as if moved by an unseen current. "Who are you?" Haruto called out. The woman turned, and in the moonlight, Haruto saw that her feet left no imprint in the sand. Her eyes, dark and mournful, met his. "I am no one who belongs here." He froze, realizing he was speaking to a ghost. In the village Kaidan, ghost stories were common, told to warn children not to wander at night. But this ghost did not frighten him. There was sadness in her presence, not malice. When she faded into mist moments later, Haruto stood alone, heart pounding. He should have prayed and forgotten, as any sensible man would, but he didn't. That night, he dreamed of her voice calling his name.
The next day, Haruto could not concentrate on his farming. His hands moved mechanically through the rice seedlings, but his mind lingered on the ghostly figure in white. That evening, against his better judgment, he returned to the shore. The tide was low, and the lanterns from the Obon festival still floated in the distance, their candlelight like stars fallen onto water. She was there again, sitting on a rock near the surf, singing the same mournful tune. "Why do you return?" she asked, without looking at him. "I wanted to know your name," Haruto said. The woman turned, her eyes distant but kind. "My name is Akiko. I was someone long ago." "Were you from this village?" Akiko looked toward the horizon, where faint silhouettes of ships were visible. "I was once promised to a sailor, but he never returned. I waited on this shore until I too became part of it. When war came," she paused, "I drowned during a naval battle near Hanaura Bay. Since then, I have wandered here." Haruto shivered, though the summer night was warm. In Shinto belief, restless spirits, yurie, often linger when they die tragically or with unfulfilled desires. They are usually feared, yet Akiko's presence was oddly soothing, as if the sorrow she carried shielded her from malice. "Why do you speak to me?" he asked. Akiko smiled faintly. "Because you are the first to see me without fear." From that night on, Haruto visited regularly. He brought small offerings, a comb, a sprig of cherry blossoms, even food he knew she could not eat, but hoped might comfort her spirit. Villagers began whispering, "He talks to someone at the shore at night. Perhaps the Hanaura ghost has chosen him." Instead of fear, Haruto felt a strange tenderness growing in his chest. He could no longer deny it. He was falling in love with a ghost. One night, when the waves were calm and the moon silvered the world, Akiko reached out and touched Haruto's face. Her hand was cool, like river water, yet soft as falling petals. "You shouldn't love me," she whispered. "Why not? I am not of your world. I cannot walk in sunlight, cannot eat with you, cannot age or grow old. I am a memory bound to this shore." Haruto held her translucent hand gently. "And yet you feel real to me." Akiko's eyes glimmered. "No one has touched me in 100 years. In Shinto tradition, love across the boundary of life and death is taboo. Spirits that linger too long often risk becoming onryo, vengeful ghosts consumed by attachment. But Haruto's love was not born of fear or guilt. It was quiet, steadfast, and accepting. Their bond grew stronger, and soon villagers noticed strange things. Haruto's crops thrived beyond expectation. Storms seemed to bypass the village, and fishermen claimed a mysterious woman guided them through foggy nights. Some said Akiko was blessing him. Others muttered that he had bound himself to something unnatural. A Shinto priest came to warn him. "The dead belong to the Kami's realm. If you keep her here, you may both be lost."
Haruto bowed respectfully, but replied, "Perhaps we are already lost without each other." That night, Akiko appeared more vivid than ever, her voice trembling. "They will try to send me away with rites to bind me to the other world. Then I will stand with you," Haruto said.
The villagers gathered at the shrine, guided by the Shinto priest. They prepared a kuyo, a memorial rite to pacify restless spirits. Ofuda talismans were hung on doorways, salt was sprinkled on paths, and sacred sakaki branches were placed at the Tori gate. Akiko appeared at the shore that night, sadness clouding her face. "They fear me," she said. "They think I will curse them." "They don't know you," Haruto whispered, standing firm by her side. The priest began chanting Norito prayers, calling on the kami to guide Akiko's spirit to the other world. A sudden wind whipped through the village, snuffing out half the lanterns. Akiko's form flickered like a reflection on water. "I don't want to leave," she cried, tears streaming though they evaporated before touching her skin. Haruto stepped between her and the priest. "Stop! She is not a curse. She is my love." The priest paused, astonished. "You love a ghost?" "Yes," Haruto said, voice firm, "and she loves me." The villagers murmured, torn between awe and fear. Akiko, touched by Haruto's defiance, reached for his hand. This time her touch was warm. "If I go," she said softly, "promise you will live." Haruto shook his head. "If you go, I go." At that moment, a wave crashed unusually far onto the shore, drenching the ceremonial altar. The priest dropped his staff, muttering, "The kami have spoken." Akiko's form grew faint, but instead of vanishing, she lingered, looking at Haruto with eyes full of eternal love and sorrow.
That night, Haruto and Akiko walked along the shore, hand in spectral hand. For the first time, she felt whole, and he felt unafraid. "If you stay, you'll be bound to this place forever," he whispered. "I would rather stay with you in one place than wander eternity alone," she replied. From that day, the villagers no longer saw Akiko as a threat. They began leaving offerings of rice and flowers at the shore, and fishermen claimed a mysterious presence calmed storms. Haruto lived his life beside her, tending fields by day and meeting her by moonlight. Though they could never share meals or children, their love transcended the limits of flesh and time. Years later, when Haruto died peacefully in his sleep, witnesses swore they saw a woman in white standing by his bed, smiling as his spirit rose. Together they vanished into the night, leaving only calm seas and full harvests behind. But whispers grew of another tale. In a distant mountain village, a child claimed to be guided at night by a mysterious figure who left no footprints, a spirit who whispered lessons of kindness and love. Some believed it was Akiko and Haruto, returning not as lovers, but as guardians. In a small mountain village far from the bustling cities of Edo, an elderly samurai named Kenshiro sat on his Engawa porch, looking out at a single cherry tree in bloom. His armor, once polished to a brilliant sheen, now rested quietly inside a cedar chest, untouched for years. His hands, calloused from decades of wielding the katana, now trembled slightly as he poured tea. Kenshiro was no longer a warrior bound to lords or battles. He had outlived his comrades and even his own family. All that remained was the tree, a gift from a woman he had once loved, a woman forbidden to him. As petals drifted like soft snow, he whispered to himself, "The last cherry blossom." In Japanese aesthetics, the fleeting life of the cherry blossom is a symbol of mono no aware, the bittersweet awareness of impermanence. For Kenshiro, this concept was once abstract philosophy, taught to young samurai to prepare them for the inevitability of death. But now, in his twilight years, he understood it with a depth only age and loss could bring. He raised his teacup, performing the movements of Chanayu, the way of tea, with slow precision, folding the silk cloth, cleansing the bowl, whisking the green matcha. These rituals, once performed for his lord, now served as a quiet prayer to memory itself. His mind drifted to the spring of his youth, the season when he had first met Aiko, the daughter of an enemy clan. Kenshiro had been a young warrior then, proud and unyielding. His life revolved around the sword, loyalty, and the honor of his house. But one spring evening, after a minor border skirmish, he had encountered Aiko. She was tending to the wounded of both sides, her white kimono stained with blood, yet her hands moved gently, tenderly, as if life itself bowed to her touch. He remembered the way she smiled when their eyes met, a smile that carried no politics, no enmity, only warmth. "Why help us?" he had asked, stunned. She answered, "Because pain has no clan," simply. In that moment, something inside Kenshiro shifted. They began meeting secretly under the very cherry tree that now stood before him in old age. Aiko would bring her koto instrument, playing soft melodies while he listened, sword resting beside him. They spoke not of war, but of dreams, a quiet home, a life without bloodshed, perhaps even children laughing under cherry blossoms. But theirs was a love the world would not allow. Both families discovered the affair. Aiko was promised to another man to cement a political alliance, and Kenshiro was ordered to sever all ties under threat of seppuku. On the day of her wedding, Kenshiro stood far away, hidden among cherry trees, watching petals fall like tears. He had vowed never to love again, dedicating himself solely to the sword.
Decades passed like drifting petals. Kenshiro became a famed swordsman, fought in many campaigns, and eventually retired when peace came under the Tokugawa rule. Yet he never married, never sought another companion. People whispered he was cold, but inside his heart remained with Aiko, a ghost he carried quietly in his soul. He often thought of the philosophy of mono no aware, taught to him by an old monk during one campaign. Beauty is beautiful because it does not last. You cannot hold the blossom forever, and so you love it more deeply. In his later years, Kenshiro planted a single cherry tree near his home, a cutting said to be from the grove where he and Aiko once met. Every spring, he performed the tea ceremony beneath it, not for guests, but for memory, folding the silk cloth, whisking tea, savoring the silence. Each cup was an offering to the past, to a love forbidden yet eternal in his heart. As the seasons turned, Kenshiro grew frail, yet the tree blossomed faithfully, as if time itself honored their bond. And now, this was to be his final spring.
On a crisp morning, Kenshiro prepared tea as petals fell like snow around him. He placed a second cup on the tatami beside him, as he always did, for Aiko. "This may be the last spring I see," he whispered. A breeze carried the scent of blossoms, and for a moment he thought he saw her, standing beneath the tree in the white kimono she had worn long ago. Whether it was memory or spirit, he did not know, nor did he care. She smiled just as she had in youth. He spoke aloud, "I am ready, Aiko. Ready to see you again, wherever you are." The tea ceremony ended with him lifting the bowl, savoring the earthy taste of matcha, then setting it down softly. He closed his eyes under the falling petals, feeling no fear, only peace. When villagers came later, they found Kenshiro sitting peacefully, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees, as if asleep. Beside him, the second teacup remained untouched, yet warm, as though someone had just held it. Above, the cherry tree shed one last blossom, which drifted down and landed gently in his open palm. They buried him beneath that tree, placing his katana and tea whisk by his side. Every spring, the villagers said, two figures could be seen under the blossoms, one old, one young, sharing tea and silence. The story of Kenshiro and Aiko spread far beyond the village, told as a lesson of love and impermanence. Children learned of mono no aware, not as an abstract phrase, but as the feeling of petals falling from a tree once planted by a lonely old man. And so, like the cherry blossom itself, fleeting yet unforgettable, the tale came to an end, soft, quiet, and beautiful. From forbidden loves and silent sacrifices, to the ghosts who lingered for one last touch of warmth, these stories were never about war or honor alone. They were about hearts daring to love, even when the world said no. And like the cherry blossoms that bloom only to fall, every love, no matter how brief, leaves its beauty behind. This is Japan's timeless whisper. Love, fragile as petals, yet strong enough to echo beyond life itself. Thank you for listening.